Okay, Second Kings, getting towards the end. We still got a little bit of time to go, but tonight we're in chapter 16, and we're looking at Ahaz, king in Judah. If you haven't picked one of these up, I printed out some more. This is a chart of the kings of Israel and Judah, just so you know where we are. We're way down here. We're getting near the end. Next week we'll be in chapter 17, and this is a very different chapter. We see the last king of Israel, and then God's judgment on Israel, so the northern kingdom. And so tonight we're in the southern kingdom, and one more wicked king. So as I started reading this chapter, I started thinking about what it means to be a parent. Why do we like to boast about our children? Don't we like? I mean, am I the only one? I love to brag about my kids. We could skip prayer time one night and just say, "What's the coolest thing your kid has done?" And we would talk for hours, wouldn't we? I mean, we would share stories, the things that we're proud of, and we could talk about their character. You know, if you're proud of your kid's character or their accomplishments, and we can go back and forth. And we would all have something to say, I'm sure. Even if you've had a difficult child, you'd find, as parents, we always find those things that we're most proud of. And I kind of wondered about that. Is that just pure ego-driven? I think we enjoy it because whenever they become someone good or demonstrate godly behavior or accomplish something special, aren't we all just kind of quietly relieved that at least for that moment they've not turned away from God or embarrassed us? I mean, isn't that what it's all about? That there's that joy that comes from that. There's a lot of different reasons, I think. But one of the things we all learn as parents, and have learned, I'm sure, is there's no magic formula, right? The best parents in the world can have great children and bad children. Oddly enough, the worst parents in the world, all at the same time, in the same house. And even the worst parents in the world can end up having a great kid. And so that's distressing and relieving at the same time. It's distressing because there's no guarantee you can do all the right things and a kid goes sideways. But it's also relieving that it's not on you. Whenever somebody comes to me for counsel about one of their children, I always say the same thing. I say, people make choices, and that includes your kids. And those choices belong to them, not to you. That doesn't absolve us from doing our best, obviously, but we got to understand that we can do our best, we can do the right things, and things not turn out well. We have an example of that tonight. I mean, we just did see Jotham, king of Judah, and he was a good king. He did that which was pleasing in the eyes of the Lord. He didn't tear down all the high places, but otherwise he loved God, and he followed after the example of David, and that was Ahaz's dad. And so now we come to Ahaz expecting great things because his dad was a good king. Oh, poor us to expect such great things. It starts out with wickedness. Verses 1 through 4. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, so that's in Israel, Ahaz, son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Unlike David, his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. Now, that expression, obviously, David is not his immediate father. Jotham is his father. We say David is his ancestor, right? This goes back to David. He is in the line of David because he's the king of Judah. So that expression is meant to hearken back to a king who loved God. Unlike David, his father, he did not do that which was right. Verse 3, it says, he followed in the ways of the kings of Israel and even sacrificed his son in the fire, engaging in detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burning incense at the high places, on the hilltops, and under every spreading tree. This is distressing. Now, because he's such a remarkable study in wickedness, I'm going to be bringing in the Chronicles, parallel verses a few times So I want to do that here as well. We'll go to 2 Chronicles 28, verses 2 and 3. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel and also made idols for worshiping the Baals, the false gods of the Canaanites. He burned sacrifices in the valley of Ben-Hinnom and sacrificed his children in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. This is wretched. So he's not following the example of David. He's not inclined after the Lord. Really, he's becoming a polytheist. We're going to see later on his mode of operating is to be an appeasing generalist and to follow every god. Doesn't want to offend anybody, so he's out there hedging his bets. He's worshiping Moloch, and he's worshiping Baal and Asherah, and throw in Yahweh at the same time. And so he's covering his bases like a guy at the track betting on every horse. And this is wretched. And so we have this example. And the reason I gave the Chronicles verse here is it mentions the valley of Hinnom. And so you actually know this valley. I'm just going to show you a map of, this would be, at this time, this is what Jerusalem would look like. And now the temple, this is where Jerusalem's going to be. This outline here, all around here, that'd be the modern wall. Okay, so the city is spread out. But the Temple Mount would be here, the temple would be here, the king's palace, and this is what was now called the city of David. And so this goes down the hill. We have two key valleys here, the Hinnom Valley and the Kidron Valley. And of course, over here is the Mount of Olives. And so the Kidron Valley and the Hinnom Valley, and they form up and meet together down here. Now, if we look at just even you can even see this this isn't the best photo, but over here on the right, this is the Mount of Olives. And when you walk down it, you want to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. You're coming down the hillside here. And coming right down here. There's a cemetery there that you're walking through. We have the Kidron Valley coming down here between the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount, and the Hinnom Valley coming across here, and they meet down here. Now, if you travel there today, where those two valleys meet is absolutely beautiful. Just lush green grass, ancient monuments and stones, and guys out there playing fetch with his dog. I think the dog's doing the fetching, but it's just a beautiful place. But in this place in the Bible is always described in the worst possible terms. This is where the dung gate let out. This is where the garbage was dumped out of the city. And so there were always fires burning. Jesus, and the name for this, Jesus called it Gehenna, where the fire doesn't go out. And the worm is always in the rotting flesh. And he used where these two valleys came together, filled with filth and smoke and never-ending fire. He used that to try to get us to understand what hell would be like. And that's how he illustrated it there. So now here in these ages of the kings, people would go down here and they would make sacrifices. Guess what, people? Ahaz, king of Judah, would come down where these valleys met and offer on the fire his son as a sacrifice to a pagan god. Now, one of his sons is going to become king. It's not him. All right? We'll get to Hezekiah, a very good king, later. Doesn't say which king, but which son of his, but obviously it wasn't Hezekiah, because Hezekiah's going to become king. But he sacrifices one of his other sons on the fire, which is incredible. Now, I know you probably don't need this, but did you know that the law of Moses, given by God, actually forbids this? Shocking, right? Yeah. You're not supposed to burn your children on a fire as an offering to a pagan god. Might want to write that one down. Leviticus 18:21. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. And then Deuteronomy, which brings all of the law together in a very summary way, reemphasizes this. Deuteronomy 12:31, you must not worship the Lord your God in their way. Who's they? The pagans. Because in worshiping their gods, they do all kinds of detestable things the Lord hates. They even burn their sons and daughters in the fire as sacrifices to their gods. There are two reasons this is wrong. Right? One is you're not supposed to worship any other god. It's the first command. So have no other gods before me. To bow down to any other altar is idolatry. And God condemns it and he forbids it. It's the first commandment. It's most serious. Ahaz is a study in syncretism. He brings everything into the table. If he were a modern day king, he would have a cross, he'd have a Star of David, he'd have a crescent, he'd have a little Buddha statue over there, he'd have all kinds of stuff. He'd have New Age crystals. He would have everything there because he just brings it all together thinking, I'm gonna get lucky on one of these. One of these is going to help me. That's the first thing. The second thing is the sacrificing of children. It has always been condemned. And believe it or not, people, they react viscerally when they're reading the Old Testament. And because a lot of times we read the Old Testament without seeing the bigger picture. And we see the Israelites coming into the promised land, and God says, I want you to kill everybody. All of them. And we react to that and say, oh, what kind of horrible genocide is this? What kind of God is this? Without considering the fact of what these people were like. These were people that regularly and religiously offered up their children to the god Moloch on the fire with great pomp and circumstances. And these were the ones. The failure here isn't just murder. It's a failure to see that people are made in the image and likeness of God. That's why the murdering of children is so abhorrent. There's no room for it. And any culture that does this is substandard. We all know that, right? Cultures are not equal. There are cultures in the world today that practice honor killings, where a father can kill his daughter if she causes him any kind of embarrassment. That's evil. It is pure evil. We should call it that. I think we would all agree with that. Pure evil. So not surprisingly, Ahaz is definitely got a dark start here as we look at his story. We can't explain why godly parents sometimes have ungodly children. I don't doubt that Jotham loved his son and wanted the best for him and tried to train him up and prepare him. But Ahaz wouldn't have it, and he sat on the throne doing pure evil. But he wasn't just wicked, he was a fool. And folly is another characteristic we see in 2 Kings 16, verses 5 through 9. Then Rezin, king of Aram. Okay, so now we're talking about to the north of Israel. Son of Remaliah, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem and besieged Ahaz, but they could not overpower him. So remember, Ahaz is king of Judah down to the south. So now we have Aram and Israel teaming up and going to make war against him. Now, when you read this, the first thing you should ask is, why are they making war against Judah? Why is Israel making war against Judah? And why is he allying himself with Aram? And this is one of those things where you got to remember the big picture. Assyria to the east is on the rise, and the power is growing every single day. And their army is massive. They are brutal. They invent methods of killing that haven't existed yet. And they're just an unstoppable force. So what's happening here in this context is Rezin and Pekah are aligned together, and they want Ahaz to join them so that three kings together can fight against Assyria. Right? Take on Tiglath-Pileser. Ahaz, he's interested only in appeasement. He doesn't want to go to war. He's going to try to buy him off. And so he says no to Rezin and Pekah, I'm not joining you. And so they're making war against him to force him. You've got to join us. I know it seems kind of a strange way to get somebody on your side, but desperate times, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so desperate times call for desperate measures. They came against Ahaz. When it says that they went up, marched up to fight, remember that's not up on a map, that's up in terms of elevation. Everybody goes up to Jerusalem because Jerusalem's on a hill. So going up to Jerusalem. So they went south, went up to Jerusalem, tried to take Ahaz, but they could not overpower him. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elath for Aram by driving out the people of Judah. Edomites then moved into Elath and have lived there to this day. We'll look at that on the map and I'll show you where that is. It's actually way far south. It's at the Gulf of the Aqaba, which is at the Red Sea. We'll see that in a minute. Ahaz, verse 7. Ahaz from Judah sent messengers to say to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, I am your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and the king of Israel, who are attacking me. So here he's just going, totally opposed to Israel at this point. Rather than fight Assyria, he wants Assyria to rescue them. He'll become a vassal, give them all the treasures of Judah. And so he sends, verse 8, Ahaz took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasures of the royal palace and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria complied by attacking Damascus and capturing it. That's Aram. He deported its inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death. So he definitely had the power. And so he's ready to take over everybody, but Ahaz buys him off. So in a sense, you could say this was a good move on Ahaz's part, except that he's allied himself with somebody who knows no boundaries and will continue to pillage Judah as a result. He had to raid the treasuries, the temple of the Lord, and send all of those precious metals out there. Now, looking at a map, so Rezin did have some success before he was destroyed. Okay, so this yellow line, we're pointing towards the Assyrian Empire over here, coming down. But Aram and Israel are coming against Judah to the south. And Elath is down here by the Red Sea. And so this area then will get settled by the Edomites. So Judah is basically surrounded by Aram and Israel. And so calling on Assyria for help took the pressure off. Tiglath-Pileser came in and did what he does well. What's the problem here, spiritually speaking? Well, Ahaz is not supposed to be writing letters and crying out to Tiglath-Pileser. Who's he supposed to be writing letters and calling out to? The Lord God. Yeah. I mean, he's in Jerusalem, for crying out loud. The temple is still there. It hasn't been destroyed yet. It's still there. The priesthood is intact. And yet he's seeking the mercy and grace of a foreign king, which just leads to more apostasy. Verses 10 through 18. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. Now, why Damascus? Well, remember, he took it over. So he's already defeated Aram. So Damascus is in Syria. That's Aram, the Arameans, right? So Ahaz is going up to him to meet him there. He saw an altar in Damascus and sent to Uriah the priest a sketch of the altar with detailed plans for its construction. So you see what's happening, right? He's already got every god he's worshiping, and wow, the Assyrians are pretty strong. Let me worship their gods too. And so the altar that's been hauled into Damascus so that Tiglath-Pileser can sacrifice to his god, Ahaz sees it and says, yeah, give me some paper, give me a pencil, somebody sketch that, and send it to Uriah. Now Uriah is the high priest. Now understand what's being asked. Build this pagan altar so that I can worship to that God in Jerusalem. So Uriah the priest built an altar in accordance with all the plans that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus and finished it before King Ahaz returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached it and presented offerings on it. He offered his burnt offerings and grain offerings, poured out his drink offering, and splashed the blood of his fellowship offering against the altar. Now, have you heard of those offerings before? Yeah, they're all in the law, right? So he's got this. He's not just worshiping a pagan god in a pagan way. He's taking the way of Yahweh, the way of the law of Moses, where he'd worship Yahweh, and he's just transferring that to another. I mean, the audacity. I mean, this is cheating on your wife and giving her clothes to your mistress. I mean, it's that bad. It's offensive. As for the verse 14, as for the bronze altar that stood before the Lord, he brought it from the front of the temple, from between the new altar and the temple of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the new altar. So he takes the altar that is there, the altar that the design was given by God to Moses, and he's moving the furniture of the temple around to make room for his altar. Verse 15, King Ahaz then gave these orders to Uriah the priest. On the large new altar, offer the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering, the king's burnt offering and his grain offering, and the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their grain offering and their drink offering. Splash against this altar the blood of all the burnt offerings and sacrifice. But I'll use the bronze altar for seeking guidance. What's the bronze altar? That's part of the furniture that was already there. That's the altar God gave the design for. So he says, I'm going to worship this pagan god, but when I need some questions answered, I'll go to Yahweh. Now, one of the saddest verses in this chapter, verse 16, and Uriah the priest did just as King Ahaz had ordered. King Ahaz cut the side panels and removed the basins from the movable stands. He removed the seat from the bronze bowls that supported it and set it in a stone base. Now he's just moving the furniture. Now he's disassembling the furniture. Verse 19, he took away the Sabbath canopy that had been built at the temple and removed the royal entryway outside the temple of the Lord in deference to the king of Assyria. So he reconfigures everything to give priority access to the north. I asked AI to reconstruct what this altar might have looked like. Who knows, okay? I wasn't worried about getting it wrong. All right, I said, considering all that we know of Assyrian architecture, what would an altar look like? And that's what it came up with. Now, if you remember, the original, the bronze altar is over here, and it's got the horns on it, and the cattle be offered, the sacrifice will be offered there. So this has been moved, and this fake altar has been put in. This is just absolute apostasy. And Israel has been doing this for years, right? Ever since the time of Jeroboam. When Israel and Judah separated, Jeroboam came in and he needed to have some kind of worship, so he just made up new stuff. And he built some golden calves, put them in Dan and Bethel. Anybody can be a priest. And so that's why Israel has struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled. But Judah has always had the temple. And Judah's had the altar, and Judah's had the Levitical priesthood until Ahaz. And then Ahaz comes in and does the same thing that Jeroboam did. Just changed everything. And this is putting Judah in a bad place. Very, very bad place. This is how Chronicles describes it. In his time of trouble, King Ahaz became even more unfaithful to the Lord. He offered sacrifices to the gods of Damascus who had defeated him. For he thought, since the gods and kings of Aram have helped them, I will sacrifice to them, so they will help me. But they were his downfall, and the downfall of all Israel. Ahaz gathered together the furnishings from the temple of God and cut them in pieces. He shut the doors of the Lord's temple and set up altars at every street corner in Jerusalem. In every town in Judah, he built high places to burn sacrifices to other gods and arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of his ancestors. So he truly is fully doing the exact same thing Jeroboam did, and that every king of Israel after Jeroboam did, and now he's doing in Judah, in Jerusalem. And he doesn't just do it in this reconfigured temple. He's doing it all over the city. It's horrendous. Which takes us ultimately to his death. As for the other events of the reign of Ahaz and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, and Hezekiah his son succeeded him as king. And again, here we have 2 Kings doesn't tell the full story. We go over to Chronicles to give a little more context. 2 Chronicles 28-27, Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of Jerusalem, but he was not placed in the tombs of the kings of Israel. And Hezekiah his son succeeded him as king. This tells me that there were still people there that had a conscience that knew right and wrong. And so they gave him a king's burial, but not in the king's tomb. They felt like he had disrespected God, which obviously he had, and they chose not to honor him by burying him in the royal tombs with the good Judean kings. So Ahaz has reduced Judah to a new low, politically, spiritually. He gave in, and he was guilty of something that people are guilty of often today, and that's giving in to the pull of the culture. People are so swayed by what everybody else thinks that rather than say, what does the Word of God say, they go with popular opinion. They say, oh yeah, people a long time ago used to think that was wrong, but not anymore. Because most people don't think it's wrong, so we're just going to adapt and change with the times. We're going to stay modern and progressive. There's a problem with that. God doesn't change.
So like the American church today.
Like the American church and the church in many countries. Europe's 200 years ahead of America in its decline. And sure, there are pockets of spirituality everywhere you look, but by and large, it starts out feeling like the right thing to do. You know, we're just trying to keep up with the times, and people make these accommodations, and they let popular opinion and the zeitgeist of the culture dictate what is morality going to be, what is right and wrong going to be. See that happening here in Costa Rica as well. As the culture has more and more and more influence, you can see it everywhere. How do we prevent that? That's a good question, right? Wish I had a good answer. I don't have a good answer. To me, when I think about what can a person do, remember how we started talking, people make choices. This is first and foremost an individual thing that each one of us have to do. We have to make a decision. What is going to be the rule of law for my life? Am I going to go along to get along? I don't want to stir up trouble, so I'm not going to say anything that would be culturally insensitive. Because what happens when you do that? Now, we have a word for it. You know, if you're not, what's that?
Compromise.
Well, compromise, yeah, but we talk about the woke culture, right? The culture says this, and if you go against that, you get canceled, right? Now, maybe that's going away. I hope it's going away. It's lasted far too long. I think maybe people should realize, but so many people now have made so much of their life online that masses of people and AI bots can make a person feel less than simply for having an opinion. It doesn't as much happen to normal people to their faces, does it? Anybody ever walk up to you in the grocery store and say, I disagree with how you're living your life? It takes a little more courage. You know, I think you have to go to a protest to have that kind of venom poured at you, but online, it's everywhere. So as I look at it as an individual decision, I have to make a choice. Is online going to be important to me, to how I feel about myself? Oh, I can use it as a tool, but am I going to base my morality and my views according to the masses? Am I going to take a poll in the mornings? How should I feel about this or that or the other? No, obviously, right? I say obviously, but what's happening? Are you the oldest here?
Probably.
Probably, yeah. Have things changed? If you ask anybody older than dirt, they'll tell you, yeah, things have changed. Things have changed, right? Think about the culture 30 years ago. What was tolerated? Oh, there was sin. There's been sin the whole time. But I'm not talking about sin. We're talking about the culture and what the culture accepts and what the culture demands. And Ahaz, I'm convinced, because he grew up in a home where God was worshipped, I'm convinced that he felt the pull of the culture most acutely, and he wanted to appease and compromise for that very reason. So to me, the answer is always individual. You choose for yourself. Because the culture is going to go that way. You just have to decide, are you comfortable being counterculture? You know, it's so funny because, I mean, I read about it in books, but in the 50s, right? There were, let's say in the Western world in the 50s, there was a very conservative culture. And to be counterculture was to be a hippie, a beatnik, a good-for-nothing lowlife, right? Which some of you were, right? But that was counterculture. Now counterculture is what? Oh, to be a person of values and morality. Because the culture, there's been a complete swap. So it used to be cool to be counterculture. Now, you know, it's condemned. It's judged. It's blasted. So if the hippies can do it, can you do it? Can you be counterculture? Most people don't want to be that way. But I think that's something we have to consider. So Ahaz died. We're coming up about 715 BC. So we're going to see next week, right before that, because we're going to jump back in time a little bit to cover the last king of Israel. And he's going to completely collapse under the Assyrian forces of Tiglath-Pileser. And Israel's going to be completely lost forever. It's going to be destroyed. And its inhabitants carried off into captivity. That kind of change is going to send shockwaves through Judah. There'll be some reaction to it, but not enough to prevent Judah from going the same way eventually and falling to Babylon. But again, it starts with this legacy of appeasement, of compromise, of syncretism, of worshiping everything and anything. If you worship everything, then you really worship nothing. You know, you really don't. So you got to choose. This reminds me of Elijah on Mount Carmel. We saw him in 1 Kings. He told the nation of Israel, he said, choose this day whom you're going to serve. If the Lord is God, then serve him. And if Baal's God, then serve him. But choose. Choose. And that's something Ahaz never had the courage to do. He could never choose.